Johnathan stared at the eviction notice, the red lettering blurred, his heart pounded in his chest. Rent overdue, bills piled high, the threat of homelessness loomed. Despair, thick and suffocating, filled the air. He was drowning in debt. His once bright eyes, now bloodshot and hollow, darted around the room. Each object held a memory of better times, times before the accident, before the medical bills swallowed him whole. He was trapped, his life a cruel parody of its former self. The clock ticked past midnight, its chimes echoing through the empty house, each strike a reminder of the time slipping away. Johnathan sat alone, the eviction notice clutched in his hand, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. The dim light cast long shadows, mirroring the darkness that had settled in his heart. A desperate plan formed in his mind, born out of sheer necessity and the gnawing fear of losing everything. He had heard stories, whispers of a place where one could make a deal, a place where the desperate could find hope, albeit at a cost. He had heard whispers of a crossroads, a place where deals could be struck, a place of power, a place of darkness. The story spoke of ancient rituals and forbidden pacts, of souls traded for desires fulfilled. It was a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where the desperate could find what they sought, but always at a price. With nothing left to lose, he ventured out into the night, the cool air biting at his skin. His heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination, each step taking him closer to the unknown. The air was thick with humidity, the silence broken only by the distant wail of a siren. The mist clung to the ground, swirling around his feet as if trying to hold him back, to warn him of the dangers ahead. Each step felt heavy, his shoes dragging on the cracked pavement. The sound echoed in the stillness, a reminder of the weight of his decision. He could feel the eyes of the city on him, judging, questioning, but he pressed on. The city, usually alive with noise, seemed to hold its breath. The usual hustle and bustle was replaced by an eerie silence, as if the city itself was aware of the gravity of his journey. He felt a presence watching him, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. He glanced over his shoulder, but the shadows revealed nothing. Yet, the feeling persisted, a constant reminder that he was not alone on this path. The crossroads awaited, and with it, the promise of a new beginning, or the end of everything he knew. The crossroads appeared out of the swirling mist, a place where paths converged and destinies were altered. The air was thick with an otherworldly presence, as if the very fabric of reality was thinner here. Streetlights flickering an eerie yellow cast long, wavering shadows that danced on the cobblestones. The light seemed to struggle against the encroaching darkness, creating an atmosphere of suspense and foreboding. The air grew colder, sending shivers down his spine. Each breath he took was visible in the frigid air, a ghostly reminder of his presence in this unsettling place. A figure materialized from the shadows, emerging slowly as if stepping through a veil between worlds. The mist clung to him, giving him an ethereal, almost spectral appearance. Tall, with an unsettling grace, the figure exuded an aura of power. His movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, as if he were gliding rather than walking. His eyes, burning embers in the darkness, seemed to see straight through Johnathan. They glowed with an intensity that was both captivating and terrifying, as if they held the secrets of the universe. "Looking for something?" the figure asked, his voice a silken whisper that sent chills down Jonathan's spine. The words seemed to echo in the mist, lingering in the air long after they were spoken. He was impeccably dressed, his suit a stark contrast to the grime of the city. The fabric seemed to shimmer slightly, catching the dim light in a way that made him appear almost otherworldly. His face, handsome in a way that made Johnathan uneasy, held a knowing smile. It was a smile that suggested he knew far more than he let on, a smile that promised both danger and intrigue. Jonathan's heart raced, his mind a whirlwind of questions and fears. Who was this man? What did he want? The air seemed to grow even colder, the mist thicker, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The figure extended a hand, his fingers long and slender, almost skeletal. "Come," he said, his voice a soft command that brooked no refusal. "Your journey is just beginning." Johnathan hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to run, but something in the man's eyes held him in place. It was as if he were caught in a web, unable to break free. With a trembling hand, Johnathan reached out, his fingers brushing against the stranger's. The contact sent a jolt through him, a spark of something ancient and powerful. Together they stepped into the mist, the world around them fading into obscurity. The Crossroads, once a place of uncertainty, now stood empty, waiting for the next soul to wander through its foggy embrace. Johnathan, his voice a dry rasp, spoke of his troubles. The figure listened patiently, the ember eyes never leaving Jonathan's face. "I can help you," the figure finally said, his voice a hypnotic purr. "I can give you everything you desire. Wealth, power, anything your heart desires." He held out a hand, long and pale, with an unsettling stillness. Johnathan stared at the hand, a glimmer of hope flickering in his despair. The offer was too tempting, the promise of escape too alluring to resist. "All I require is a trifle," the figure continued, his smile widening. "Your soul." Johnathan hesitated, a cold dread gripping his heart. He knew the stories, the legends of deals struck at Crossroads, but desperation like a vice tightened its grip on him. He looked at the eviction notice, felt the weight of his despair. With a trembling hand, Johnathan reached out and took the figure's hand. The touch sent a jolt through him, a feeling of ice and fire combined. A bargain was struck, sealed with a handshake in the dead of night. The next morning, Johnathan woke to find a briefcase at the foot of his bed. It was filled with money, more than he had ever seen. He paid his debts, the eviction notice now a distant memory. He bought new clothes, ate at expensive restaurants, and indulged in every luxury he had ever desired. Life was good, better than he could have ever imagined. He reveled in his newfound wealth, the source of his fortune a distant, easily ignored thought. The world was his oyster, and he was ready to devour it whole. But something wasn't right. The laughter of strangers seemed to hold a mocking tone. Their smiles felt like sneers. The food he ate tasted like ash in his mouth. Sleep offered no escape, his dreams haunted by burning eyes and whispers of his damnation. The city, once a symbol of hope, now felt like a prison. The shadows seemed to stretch and writhe, filled with unseen eyes that watched his every move. He was surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. One night, he heard a voice whispering his name. It seemed to come from the walls, from the very air itself. The voice grew louder, more insistent, until it was a roar that echoed in his skull. He saw the figure again, standing at the foot of his bed, the ember eyes burning with a cold fire. The figure's face, once handsome, was now twisted in a grotesque mockery of a smile. "Enjoying your newfound wealth?" the figure asked, his voice a chilling rasp. Johnathan tried to speak, to apologize, to beg for another chance, but the words wouldn't come out. His tongue felt like lead, his throat constricted. He was trapped, both by the pact he had made, and by his own crippling fear. The figure leaned in close, his breath hot and sulfurous on Jonathan's face. "Everything has a price, Johnathan," the figure whispered, his voice a hiss of static. "And yours is due." The world around Johnathan began to unravel. The laughter he heard grew louder, more menacing. Faces in the crowd contorted into demonic visages. His reflection in the mirror became a stranger, his eyes burning with the same infernal light as the figure. The city itself seemed to turn against him, the buildings looming like monstrous shadowy figures. He was lost in a labyrinth of his own making, each turn leading him further down a path of madness and despair. The night of reckoning arrived like a thief in the night, shrouded in darkness and foreboding. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder and the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the deserted streets. Midnight struck, and with it came an unsettling sense of dread that seemed to seep into the very bones of the town. Johnathan, his sanity hanging by a thread, found himself drawn back to the Crossroads. It was a place he had hoped never to see again, a place where his fate had been sealed. The Crossroads, now a symbol of his impending doom, seemed to call out to him, pulling him closer with an invisible force. His mind raced with memories of the choices he had made, each one leading him further down a path of no return. The figure awaited him, his form now a towering monstrosity of shadow and flame. Its eyes glowed with an unholy light, piercing through the darkness and into Jonathan's very soul. The air around the figure crackled with malevolent energy, and the ground beneath it seemed to smolder with an otherworldly fire. Johnathan could feel the heat emanating from the creature, a reminder of the hellish fate that awaited him. Jonathan's soul, twisted and corrupted by greed, was ripped from his body. The pain was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a searing agony that tore through his very being. He could feel his essence being pulled away, leaving behind a hollow shell of what he once was. The dark mist that surrounded him seemed to feed on his suffering, growing thicker and more oppressive with each passing moment. He screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the empty streets. His cries for mercy went unanswered, swallowed by the darkness that enveloped him. The echoes of his torment reverberated through the night, a haunting reminder of the price he had paid for his greed. His face contorted in terror, his eyes wide with the realization of his eternal damnation. The figure absorbed Johnathan's essence, his laughter a symphony of malice that echoed through the void. The sound was chilling, a cacophony of evil that seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of reality. The figure's aura grew brighter, fueled by the stolen soul, and its power seemed to swell with each passing second. Johnathan's essence was now a part of the creature, lost forever in the abyss. Johnathan was no more, his existence erased, his soul condemned to an eternity of torment. The Crossroads, once a place of choice, had become a symbol of his eternal suffering. The desolate landscape around him seemed to stretch on forever, a barren wasteland devoid of hope or redemption. The eerie atmosphere was a constant reminder of the darkness that had consumed him. The Crossroads stood silent, the only evidence of the Pact a faint whiff of sulfur in the air. The smell was acrid, a lingering reminder of the infernal bargain that had been struck. The eerie lighting cast long shadows, creating an otherworldly scene that seemed to exist outside of time and space. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. A chilling reminder that some deals, once struck, can never be undone. The Crossroads, now a place of eternal damnation, served as a warning to all who might be tempted by the promises of power and wealth. The faint sulfur mist lingered in the air, a ghostly presence that seemed to whisper of the horrors that lay beyond. The ominous atmosphere was a testament to the darkness that had claimed Johnathan's soul, a darkness that would never release its grip.